Following the appointment of Adeni Bashir Adewale as the Acting Controller General of Customs in Nigeria, many Nigerians are expecting a drastic reduction in smuggling activities and a better trade of international goods and services. Some other functions of the agency includes enforcing customs and related legislation, assisting with control of overseas passengers, crew, aircraft, ships, cargo, amongst others. With some of the challenges being economic crime, money laundering, menace of terrorism, amongst others, it is expected that with this new appointment, it will provide better security against this and make very good use of the e-services. Joining us in the studio is a strategy consultant and public affairs analyst, Dipo Oyewole. Dipo, good morning. It's good to have you on the program.
Good to see you. Thank you for having me. Great.
And we also have via Zoom from Abuja a strategist, a policy analyst, and Group CEO, Global Investment and Trade Company, Baba Yusuf. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Veronica.
Good morning, Baba. Good to see you.
Right.
Hey, Mike. Hi. Good morning.
Great.
Good to see you too.
Right.
Right. Let me begin with you, Baba. What does this new appointment mean for the customs as well as Nigerians from your perspective?
Thank you very much. Very excited with this appointment. Yet again, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has demonstrated his readiness to transform Nigeria and by so doing, transforming the critical players that would enable that. Fine gentleman, the new CG, Adeni Adewale, excellent track record, about 30 years. No-nonsense officer. That is what we need now. The Nigerian Customs Service is an enforcement agency and also a critical revenue collector for the Federal Republic of Nigeria. If you look at his track record, he's the kind of person we need at this critical point in time to, be at the helms of affairs of the Nigerian Customs. Recall the famous interception and seizure of over $8 million cash at the Murtala Mohammed International Airport in the year 2020. This is one amongst other feats that he has achieved to demonstrate that he is indeed a fit for purpose for this particular, assignment. And I look forward to a more vibrant, result-oriented Nigerian Customs Service moving forward.
All right, let's bring it back to the studio here, Dipo. Some persons have called for the merger of a customs service, NIMASA, and the Federal Inland Revenue Service, since they're all revenue-generating agencies, for them to work together in harmony. I wonder what you make of that. What will be different?
I'm not sure how feasible that would be because the primary charter of customs, like rightly said in your introduction, is a lot more nuanced than just collecting revenue. Unfortunately, we have then reduced them to primarily being a revenue-generating organization, which that's not their primary charter. It's one of their secondary functions with how they're structured. But I would want them to still maintain their own independence, if I would say that, because, like I said, their responsibilities are a bit nuanced, and it also borders along enforcement of the law to some degree, which the FIRS and the MASA, that's not part of their charter. So for me, in terms of priority, I would say that takes a lot more precedence than them being a revenue-generating organization with what we have in our current system today. So I think it's important that we focus a lot more on that and ensure that they focus primarily more on that role of them being an arm of the law enforcement agency as opposed to them just being there to collect revenue. Because, if you talk about customs today, what you hear, the first thing that rings in people's heads, maybe what they collect at the ports, at the borders, and so that's not their primary function. Is to also ensure that illegal goods and services don't get into the country, there isn't smuggling being done, and all these illegal activities are curbed, and they don't make their way into our borders and also not exported as well. That's the primary function, and I wouldn't want us to model up their responsibilities and their primary functions. So I would want them to still maintain the primary functions of being a law enforcement agency, and maybe the MASA and FIRS can sort themselves out being collapsed together.
In fact, there are those who have said that they should be responsible for trade facilitation as against revenue generation. I'm bringing that question to you, Baba Yusuf. What do you say to those who are saying the focus now should be on trade facilitation as against revenue generation?
By that, you mean the customs or with the other agencies?
For the customs.
Well, the custom has an omnibus mandate, as enshrined in the act setting them up. Very important for us to go back to the statute setting of that entity and look at what are the, objectives and what are the deliverables of customs. First of all. Secondly, what are the best practices, global best practices with regards to the functions of the Nigerian Customs Service? It appears it's a kind of catch-22 for Nigerian customs. First, I totally agree, is the enforcement of law in terms of ensuring, that all the requirements for border regulations and all that are done by the customs. But indeed, it will not take away that critical responsibility of trade facilitation, by Nigerian customs. So what is important as it is today is to look at the divisions, the various divisions within the Nigerian customs that have focal point with regards to those particular functions, i.e. trade facilitation, which includes revenue collection, and also the regulatory part of it, enforcing the regulations. I also agree that sometimes it's a bit tricky for you to tell an enforcer, a regulator or someone that will enforce regulation to be the same person to collect revenue. Maybe those are the things that will look moving forward, in terms of legislation or in terms of looking at the law setting it up. But indeed, critical is trade facilitation, which is part of the mandate of the Nigerian Customs as it is today. We look forward to that being done in a way and manner that it will improve our economy and that it will protect, our borders and our interests. The issue of the insecurity, the issue of proliferation of arms, the issue of economic sabotage, very, very critical. I hope and pray that the new CG will prioritize, his agenda and have a strategy to ensure that the critical mandate of, first of all, protecting the territorial integrity of Nigeria is key. And of course, in trying to facilitate trade, which is very important given the state of our economy, is also done in a way and manner that it is, moves in a geographic progression.
Okay. Now, Dipo, we've talked about several times, Nigerians have talked or had the concern regarding the porous borders that we've always had through where a lot of smuggling takes place, take place unhindered. We've seen videos sometimes of so many things being brought into the country in droves, in buses, on bikes, even on camels and horses, and so on. At different times, we've seen all of these. The latest was the issue of the petroleum products that were smuggled,
yes,
from Nigeria to neighboring countries and so on. Now, if we look at the roles ahead of the challenge, things that the new custom CG has to surmount, what would you be looking at? How challenging would it be for him to handle all of these things? Because when it comes to getting the parameters of Nigeria, it's not easy to fence Nigeria or fence a country as it is. That's obviously impossible. But those porous borders, how do we get to mount them? And how do we get to keep what is supposed to be in, and then keep what is supposed to be out?
Okay, well, I believe the challenges are there, but with his track record, I don't believe it should be challenging for him because he has the experience, over 30 years on the job, has an idea with what is where and what is going on in what part of the country. But with regards to unmanned borders, I remember we had this conversation a couple of years ago when the past administration talked about closing the borders, and then we said we had over 1,000 unmanned borders around the country. For me, I would like to see a very robust agenda emanating from the customs with how they will partner with other law enforcement agencies to see how they could man those borders. Because either we like it or not, they do not have the manpower to man those borders. Okay? And even the borders that are the legal borders, we would also like to see a deployment of a lot of technology so that there is seamless movement of goods and services as much as they will be carrying out their regulatory responsibilities of ensuring that they are legal items either coming into the country or leaving the country. So it is important that they have a robust agenda with regards to partnering with other law enforcement agencies. I know they have something of that nature because when you go around certain border towns, you see not just the customs, you see immigrations, you see other law enforcement agencies. I think now we need to have a properly formal arrangement where everybody then knows that these guys are working together. So maybe on a particular section of the road, you have maybe 3 customs agents, you have 3 people from the Nigerian Army, you have 2 people from the Immigration Service, so that they can also augment each other's responsibilities.
Like a joint task force.
A joint task force, so that the customs service will not be overwhelmed and there won't be too stretched thing. Because we don't need them just at the land borders, we need them at the airports, we need them at the seaports, we need them everywhere. And I'm not sure we have the manpower to cover all of that. So they need to have a serious joint task force to ensure that that happens. But more importantly, I would like to emphasize that this would be a good time to have the conversation around deploying technology to ensure that even if it's at the seaports, if it's at the land borders, so that things move a lot quicker. Because now we're talking about facilitating trade. How you facilitate trade is also ensuring that when goods get into the country, they don't take too long to clear. At the ports, I mean, there's been a lot of reports of how much to take you to get a 40-foot container from China to Apapa, and then from Apapa to VI, being practically the same amount or being more expensive within Lagos. It doesn't make sense. And when you find out what those costs are, aside from what you pay in terms of informal tolls on the road, most of those costs happen within the ports. Some of them are with custom duties. And now, with regards to the cost of the custom duty and all of that, that's a matter of legislation. And that's not what we're talking about right now. But we're saying it must be seamless and it must encourage trade. We have different ports around the world or around the world, seaports, land borders, where people transact businesses, where people move goods and services. And we know how quickly people get things done across those lines. So that is one way we can see the swift facilitation of trade within our borders.
Basically, talking about reforms, there are those who have talked about this aspect of bringing reforms into the customs, and that's the question I'm bringing to you now. What more would you like to see with regards to reforms in the customs?
Thank you. First of all, critical reform is with regards to technology. So just to give maybe more information about that, to refresh our memory, that project is ongoing. It's a huge project, a PPP that was approved by the Federal Executive Council of Administration of President Muhammad Buhari, that is targeted as generating over $200 billion revenue for Nigeria. It is a PPP between the Nigerian Customs on behalf of the federal government, the African Finance Corporation, and 2 other entities, which is a kind of concessionaire type project at the end of the day. That project has about 4 different modules. First of all, the revenue collection part of it, which includes cargo tracking. There is the border management part of it, which is very important, taking it from the conversation we were having earlier, and what is called the telecommunications and video surveillance. These are very key for the management of our borders, manned and unmanned. So that I am very, very interested to see that the new CG pays attention to sort out some of the logjams. One of the key issues within that project is that there's a litigation issue, that has stalled it. I expect the CG and indeed under the leadership of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to untangle these entanglements, and so that this project can proceed with speed, and we'll have to get the benefit of this project, because there is no how we will talk about successful border management, successful blockage of leakages in terms of revenue collection without deploying technology. It is practically impossible, even where the borders are manned. And I'm talking about what I call the critical economic gateways, the airports, the seaports, and the land borders. Even where they are, we know there are status, for example, with regards to outgoing cargo, which is very important for us. Of course, the import is also important for us to ensure that a legal illicit items don't come in. But also in terms of export, if you don't comply with those requirements of export, for example, items have to pass through some kind of equipment to ensure that they are not illicit before they are ticked off for export, then the reform will not be achieved, will not be successful. Secondly, is the discipline of the staff of the Nigerian Customs, the officers of the Nigerian Customs. Adewale CG is coming with that track record of no nonsense, of enforcement of regulation. He has that also as an achievement. He's known as somebody that is a stickler for regulations. So we expect that to come to bear in seeing how the officers at the economic gateway also conduct themselves. We are talking about that factor of corruption where, you have some, errant officers that in cahoots with the saboteurs. We expect discipline to be more enshrined in the Nigerian Customs, and we see consequences when officers, behave in a way and manner that is not right, because that is the only way you whip people into line. We expect also to see streamlining of processes apart from the modernization, with regards to how things will be in terms of trade facilitation. I give you an instance. In the airport, we have what we call the single window platform, in line with the ease of doing business concept and also provision, which is an international, statute and standard we align to. So we need to see achievement of that function, where you have layers and layers of officers trying to do the same thing, slowing down processes, creating logjams and traffic, whether it is in the seaport or the airport. We want to see that, happen as part of the reform. Accountability, transparency, respect for the rule of law. We want to see that. I expect that will happen in this administration.
All right, Dipo, under Hamad Ali, we saw at a time where he was making a case for custom officers because in his argument, he was saying that there needs to be a special salary package for customs officers from the perspective of the fact that they are the ones who rake in resources and monies and revenues to government. And sometimes when they don't have what it takes by themselves, they could easily get tempted, and all of that. And I recall under former Minister Kemi Adeosun, the debate was back and forth, regarding that and so on. But talk to us about the welfare of these people, because if you're highly motivated, you can do the wonders that you're supposed to do.
Of course, it's a critical conversation to have about the welfare of customs agents and, by extension, our law enforcement officers. We've had this conversation for years now, that it is very important that we look after their welfare, because it isn't just about customs being tempted. What about the soldiers that go out to protect us against local and external threats that then die in the line of duty? Their lives matter than any temptation anyone is facing. This is not underscoring what the responsibilities of each person is or each arm of law enforcement is. But the conversation for me is mostly about ensuring the adequate welfare of every single person that is a law enforcement officer in this country. It is important that we understand and we respect their service to our country, and we must be seen to appreciate them as such. Not just to be seen to do so, but it must reflect in how we treat them in terms of their welfare, their bonuses, their salaries being paid on time, their pensions, and what happens in the case of when there's casualty. These things need to be done holistically, because that in itself is what would encourage people. Because going into the service in those particular areas of law enforcement firstly comes from a place of service. And coming from a place of service, we must also understand the fact that either way you like it, people still need to be encouraged and to be saying that, okay, what we're really doing matters, not just in terms of the results they get while on the job, but also in terms of remuneration, because in the end, people have families. And the reality is the service you are providing will not necessarily translate into food on the table of your family. It's what you get from it in terms of legal remuneration, in terms of salary, bonuses, and the overall welfare package. So this is something that we must look at and we must be very deliberate about, so that we don't then take one step forward and 10 steps back, where you have certain persons in law enforcement being able to carry out their duties and then, like you said, are being tempted, because either we like it, the realities are there, the realities are clear of what the economic situation is in the country for us all. So it isn't peculiar to anybody that's just in law enforcement or any part of the service, so to say. So we must be very deliberate about the welfare of the people who are in our law enforcement agencies. It is important that we have these conversations, and it must be looked at holistically.
Right. Is it possible to really have a kind of welfare that would cover for the challenges they face, that would take into cognizance all of the realities on the ground? Is it possible in the Nigeria that we have found ourselves, looking at the fact that we are saying that we have a debt burden, we are still trying to generate revenue, we have all of these challenges on the ground, yet we must have this consideration for welfare of every personnel, whether security, in fact, the generality of Nigerians?
Well, I would say that it is realistic. However, we must look at it as a journey and not a destination. Okay, it's a journey in the sense that if the overall objective is to get them to, for example, maybe 200,000, you start from 20,000, that's part of the journey, but you must be seen to take a step. That's the important thing, because in the end, we all want some form of forward motion in our lives, either as law enforcement agents, people that work in private sector, public sector. But we must see that, okay, so you want to get them to 200,000, you tell them, okay, no, we can't afford this right now, but we will start from 20,000, and by so number of months, 18 months, 24 months, we can see how to get to 50,000, and you're seen to be deliberate with how you move the needle, and not just saying, okay, we'll do it. Like, it's practically the same thing we're seeing with the whole ASU conversation that we had over the years, where the government says, okay, this is what we'll do, and then you're not seen to be operating in good faith. It's really just that. So for me, it is quite realistic, and then comes down to a matter of priority. Prioritizing the limited resources we have to say that we cannot get them to where they need to get to immediately, but we will take it one step at a time. Because I believe that if we're being reasonable, even in whatever kind of arrangement we have or relationship, once it is seen that particular steps are being taken one step at a time, we just have to be reasonable about it to admit that there is progress being made, and not just say that, okay, we're just being stagnated and it's just about empty promises. So yes, it is possible, but we must take it one step at a time.
All right, but let me come to you on this. There's this image that the moment you join the customs, there are certain areas that are very lucrative. And if you're sent to those places, within months, you have made it in the parlance that we use in Nigeria. I wonder where that perception comes from. I wonder if you've heard that too.
Actually, it's not just a Nigerian custom thing, Mike. It's an overall public service issue. I mean, if you look at it from a higher level perspective, you see people talking about ministerial appointments, the juicy ministerial slots and all that. Talk about the legislature, juicy Senate or House committee and all that. So it's a whole cultural issue we have in this country. And sometimes also it's not just a perception, actually the reality, either from the point of view of the status of the office, or the privilege of the office and how people, use it unduly or due to corruption. So when we bring it back to custom, it is what it is, just like it is in the Nigerian police and the Nigerian army and all that. And even in the issue is, it is there. People even lobby. We hear people lobbying to be posted to some quote unquote juicy positions. In the case of custom, it is more maybe emboldened because of the golden opportunities that we hear people making humongous amount of money, of course, because of the economic sabotage opportunities, the light. I mean, if you can imagine the kind of monies that are being intercepted to drugs, illicit drugs and all that. So it is a cultural issue. And I would like to just tie it back to the discussion about remuneration that my fellow panelist was discussing about. You see, you can increase this monies to 1 million per month for the lowest officer. If you don't deal with the issue of corruption, if you don't deal with the issue of culture, if you don't deal with the issue of the other intangible motivation, there are the ones that are monetized and there are the ones that are not monetized. People that are frustrated because they are not promoted on time, that is an issue. So we need to look at it holistically. So first of all, from the remuneration part angle, we have to look at the entire civil service reform with regards to minimum wage, which is a matter on the table, and this issue of job evaluation. Job evaluation is what will tell you and what exists in some parastatals earn more than others. It's from the point of view of job evaluation, for example, the NNPC or the people in the oil and gas, DPR and all that versus others. In the case of customs, because they are holding a very critical portfolio also, without making others look as if they are not doing anything better. I mean, the soldiers in the war front, I mean, are facing higher risk. But importantly, we should have within every service some kind of reward system, if you like, for performance. I think this will augment whatever is there in the interim. And then when the economy is sorted out, I'm sure the government will look at ways and means to minimize that from the money point of view. But if it is a cultural issue, no matter how much you pay people, they will still not have enough. And I think that should be tackled, wholesomely, apart from this man. So this issue of juicy, that also will be dealt with from the point of view of meritocracy. And I said somewhere where I wrote to Mr. President that we look forward to the entrenchment of meritocracy. We look forward to entrenchment of meritocracy in our polity, so that people will know that they get what they deserve based on merit, and to have zero tolerance for indolence, nepotism, etc. That will help a great deal. Now the ball is in the court of the CG, the new CG. Let us see how transfers will be made. Let us see how the money levels will be done. We look forward to meritocracy. We look forward to the pursuance of excellence. That is what will minimize or discourage people from this sort seeking for this movement. After all, it is the CG that will approve these postings.
Interesting. Now, let's bring it back to you now, Dikpo. The matter of accountability and transparency is also on the front burner. How would you want the new CG to address that aspect?
Very decisively. And I mean, like we heard earlier about his reputation of being a no-nonsense person. We would hope that that will come into play now that he's the new CG, and that there are consequences for actions. Because, I mean, like Baba Yusuf rightly said, it's mostly a cultural issue. It's not just a customs issue. And when we are able to establish the fact that when there's bad behavior, there are consequences to follow, then it becomes a deterrent. But where that isn't the case, basic human nature, really, it continues. So that needs to be enshrined in the new system. And we'd hope that this would be what we'll see in all the branches of law enforcement now that we have new security chiefs. Yeah. So it's like wiping the slate clean and we're starting afresh. So we're hoping that this particular mandate would be given, or has been given, to the new security chiefs to see how they can clean house and set a new standard, or set new standards and have a new cultural system where there are consequences for bad behavior. And we shouldn't just leave it at consequences for bad behavior, but there's also reward for good behavior. Because unfortunately, sometimes in this part of the world, what we typically focus on is what you didn't do well, and that's the only time we talk. But if you do something right, we act like we didn't say. So the question is, where's the encouragement to do something good? Where's the encouragement to do the right thing? Should you do the right thing all the time? Of course. But sometimes when you are in particular systems where it is difficult to maintain that kind of standard, some form of encouragement is also ideal. And we've had cases where some folks working at the airport saw bags of money and then returned it. I mean, a lot of people will say that, oh, why did you return it? God answered your prayers and you should go and be blessed. But interestingly, it's good to see that we still have a lot of people with principles and integrity. But within any particular system, it is important that we understand the place of reward and consequences. They must go together. We mustn't just say that it's just about consequences. There is also a place for reward. Consequences as a deterrent, reward as an encouragement. So it is important that we're able to balance it with that particular dynamic to ensure that we have a more robust system, and a system where the culture is right and then the culture is ideal. Because part of the things that I find very embarrassing is where you have practically every single person that comes into the country, either they're foreigners or they're locals, coming and then they complain about how things are at the airports, where they say, oh, Oga, something for me, and you go through 6-8 people and it's like something for me. It's quite embarrassing. So we need to see how we address the cultural issue at the foundational level and see how we can also streamline the processes to ensure that things are a lot smoother and they're a lot easier. I mean, like you rightly said, not having 5 people doing the work of 2 people, having repetitive processes in the place. It doesn't make any sense. It wastes a lot of time. It wastes resources. It wastes time. So we must see how we get things right now that we have new security chiefs and the slate is practically wiped clean.
All right. But let's talk about the issue of the freedom to operate. We have seen in the past where there has been reports of interference in the operation of the customs, especially even the CG. There was a report at the time when Hamid Ali took over. He requested to answer directly to the president so that he could have some level of freedom to operate. Speak to us sometimes. We hear of sometimes through the ministries that the customs, reports to. There are other agencies there. There are other, sometimes even from the legislature, interferences here and there. Speak to us from that window. What should be cleared as a way of allowing him, like you mentioned earlier, he's a thoroughbred. He's someone who has rose through the ranks. He understands the work. He's an intelligent officer, a fine, intelligent, refined officer. So how do we allow him to work and bring his skill to bear when it comes to the task ahead of him?
It's a function of the personality type and leadership style of the President, Commander-in-Chief of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Right? The leader in the front decides how his government will work. If Mr. President, from day one, from his body language, from his mandate, and consequences occur once or twice with regards to this kind of issues, everybody will fall in line. What am I saying? When you see people, for example, the previous CG, but like you rightly said, went and asked that he wanted to report directly to Mr. President because he believed that was the best way for him to deliver results, which I totally disagree with. If we have status and we have a system in place, and you have to go to Mr. President for you to be able to achieve that, whereas it is not like that ab initio, then we have a systemic problem or we have a leadership problem. Mr. President will allow this gentleman to do their job. From his antecedent, we know how he operated and we know how he operates. He empowers people. He gives you the chance to deliver, to perform, on your own account. So I don't envisage those interagency squabbles, if you like, or undue interferences, as the case could be in the previous administration happening now. We are seeing the body language of Mr. President, and those that have known him before know that there is a way things are done. Things are done properly. You follow the process, you follow the system, and interagency collaboration and synergy are critical success factors to delivery of good governance. We saw Mr. President bringing the service chiefs, the former service, to say, look, there must be synergy, there must be collaboration. And that is the only way to move forward. So undue interferences, I hardly expect it to happen because it's a function of the type of leader and his style of governance, like I said. Of course, it may happen, and frictions happen. Even in the United States of America, you see the FBI having squabbles with the Coast Guards and all that. But that is from the point of view of operational issues. With regards to the legislature, their functions are very clear. I expect people to stay within their mandate.
Wrap things up now. We must thank you, Baba Yusuf, strategist, policy analyst, and Group CEO, Global Investment and Trade Company, for your time on the program, as well as strategy consultant and public affairs analyst, Dikbo Oyewole, for your time on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much.